Welcome to Pressure Point. I'm Brad Newcombe. North Americans are increasingly aware that body, mind, and spirit are linked in ways that affect our overall health. Other cultures have known this for centuries, but people are beginning to recover long-ignored healing practices with wonderful results. My guests are involved in healing touch programs, and we're going to talk about new kinds of healing touch and healing alternatives, I guess. And I'm happy to welcome Rochelle Graham. And Rochelle, you're a physiotherapist by training. You're a certified healing touch practitioner and a member of the American Holistic Nurses Association.
Yes.
And Patricia Baker, with a nursing and social work background, and now a United Church minister at Gibson's Seashelt. Welcome to both of you. And I just have to say that I'm really quite excited about this because I just have so many questions about all these alternative healing touch programs, friends who are interested in them or have tried them and so on. So it's a whole new area, it feels like. How did you get started, Rochelle? What got you onto this?
How far back do you want to go?
Well, you choose.
I'll quickly go back to, I've been a physiotherapist for 20 years. And shortly after I started working, I was working at a native hospital in Edmonton called the Charles Campbell. And a client that I had there had clinically diagnosed ankylosing spondylitis, rheumatoid arthritis, and rheumatic fever. And I was doing the usual physiotherapy things, and he wasn't getting better. In fact, he was getting much worse and losing weight and getting very ill. And he signed himself out of the hospital, and I thought to die. And he came back a month later absolutely fine. And he had gone to see a native healer in Alberta, and to this day has not had any problems with those illnesses. So it was then that I began to realize that there was more to my understanding of the body and how healing happened than I knew. And that was the initial interest in it. I then spent some time over the next few years spending time with that native healer, learning bits from him. And then when I got into raising my children, I left it until I went back to work at St. Paul's Hospital about 6 years ago.
St. Paul's in Vancouver.
St. Paul's in Vancouver, and took a course in therapeutic touch then and began to get involved once again into healing arts.
Okay, Patricia, you have a nursing and social work background, which is somewhat similar to a physiotherapy, and now you're a United Church minister. And where did your interest in healing touch begin?
Well, I could say, like, Shelley, how far back do you want to go?
And again, I'll say, you choose.
For a long, long time, I've had an interest in not alternative, but adjunct medicine, and did a lot of reading. My path has been more intellectual from the reading background than experiential. But about late 1970s, before I went into theology, I had an experience that was a turning point, but one that I was not able to talk about with people that I knew in the church. I may have been if I had found the right people in the church, but at that point I couldn't talk about it. And it was this: we had a very close friend who was diagnosed with severe pancreatitis, had ulcers in the pancreas. And I was visiting in hospital, and I happened to be there, not knowing that I was going to be there the day he was taken into surgery. After he had been wheeled out of the room, I was going to follow down to the elevator, and before I went, one of the people in the room, one of the attendants, said, "Say goodbye to him, you may not see him again." I walked with him to the elevator, and the next day I went to visit. He was unconscious in ICU. And as I stood by the bed, I felt directed, overpoweringly directed, to put my hands on over the dressings and everything, and just stand quietly, intentionally wishing him to know love and the kind of love that people had for him. I knew nothing about healing touch at that point. Sometime later, a few days later or weeks later, anyhow, he got better. I'm not making any connections with what I did, except that something I believe, happened to me, if not to him at that time. And yet in the church, I couldn't talk about it. After that, after I was ordained and we were working in Kelowna, I had the opportunity to do some workshops with a woman called Effie Chow on healing energies and healing systems, and did a lot more reading. And still couldn't find very many people within the church context to talk about it. Then 2 years ago I moved to Gibson's, and direction, coincidence, nah, serendipity.
Okay,
Shelley
so
and I made a connection. We'd never met one another before, and made this connection in Gibson's.
Okay.
And the healing touch issues have begun to draw together all these strange threads of my own background and explorations.
Okay, so you two have had very powerful experiences that have altered the courses of your lives, and probably those sounds like the way in which you see things. I mean, you were in healthcare professions, and then obviously have been trained to think a certain way, to see the world and to see illness in certain ways, and something sort of like a bolt from the blue sort of changes that. Okay, I haven't had that experience, so tell me what happens with this therapeutic touch. Like, what's going on?
Well, I can tell you the best my understanding of it and
Okay.
what I experience.
Sure.
I'm not sure I can tell you what's going on, but
But you know you know where my
Yes.
question is coming from, because
yeah.
I too have been grown up where you get sick, you go to the doctor, you take a pill, you have surgery, you do all those kinds of things.
Yeah.
But this is very different.
well,
Sounds it?
I just want to say that I came from a very skeptical place in that I have examined the body. I knew what was there, and I didn't find any energy in the body when I was doing dissection. So I was very skeptical. What my experience has shown me is that there is something that moves through me that is more than me. And I have a book that talks about 40 different cultures that call it various names for a life force. So my experience is that life force, be it energy, be it God's power, moves through me to the other person. The other person's body takes that and does whatever it needs to begin its own healing. So I'm not the healing person. I'm simply the conduit that allows that to flow through me to help the other person.
I think the other thing, Brad, is that we're coming to recognize, we have done this for a number of years, that our being does not end at the surface of our skin. There is more to us than ends here. That there is a sense of energy that we know that we can affect one another. We can impact our own systems. We can impact the energy of one another as well.
So we could do that, I suppose, positively or negatively, right? Is that or how? Like how, who?
In that sense of interfering with one another's energy, we can. But in the healing kind of energy or the healing touch, it's almost innate, isn't it, Shelley?
Well, then that brings me a question: is can anyone access this? Like the two of you have been are involved in healing touch. Could someone like me do that, or someone who's never experienced this, or anyone? I mean, who is it? Or are some people healers, just like some people are maybe more gifted, carpenters or whatever?
From my experience, everyone can learn this. It's something that we do innately. When we reach out with compassion to someone that's hurting, in fact, we're doing that. What we begin to do within the program of Healing Touch is name exactly what's happening. We begin to language it.
So and how do you do that? I'm interested. So Sam, first day in class, and what is it? What?
Well, the first thing we do is experiment with learning exactly where those areas are around our body that is more than our body. So it would be like feeling the edges.
And what do you feel?
What do I feel? I feel a slight pressure.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a tingling. Sometimes it feels like heat. And it's very subtle.
And how close is it to the body?
Usually it's several feet away
Really?
from the body.
So is that mine you're feeling?
That's yours I'm feeling.
Really?
That's right.
That's amazing.
And actually, if we come in from behind you, Brad, you will reach a point where you feel the other person entering your energy field.
That's why when you're in the supermarket, you're really impatient, right? And you don't say anything, but you're sort of throwing those, you know, impatient vibes. People ahead of you can turn around and it's almost like they caught you.
Yes, that's right.
It's the energy that they picked up
Or
on.
if I was to come and stand too close to you, you might back up.
Right. Okay, so where does so there's energy, but so then the healing comes, is it from the thoughts? Is it like, is this a connected thing, or is it a prayer? I mean, I'm just...
What we teach is that it comes with intention. That, and for some people that might take the form of prayer. But what you're doing is you're directing that you want to be a vehicle to help the other person.
What are some of the stories, success stories, or how are people affected? How are people touched? That, you know, just a couple of stories.
Certainly people find quickly deep relaxation with healing touch. I think that those of us who are at the very early levels of training specifically in the Healing Touch program are clearly aware that deep relaxation is one of the first things that people feel. But other kinds of things such as draining off pain, being able to pull off pain, as I can do with my grandchildren. And one of the little ones now will come to me and say, "Pull it off, Nana," because she knows. Pull off the pain.
Now,
things like that.
I'm sure that as people are listening and watching, I mean, well, actually, when I spoke to you on the phone prior to the interview, Rochelle, I mean, I immediately started on a conversation. I have a friend who, you know, and then there was someone else, you know, in the studio just before we went on who said, I have a friend who has this problem. I mean, and I'm sure there's people watching that so much pain, as you mentioned, Patricia, in the world, and illness and suffering, and some of it is physical, but some of it's emotional, spiritual. Where do people go? Like, and how do you find out who, you know, I mean, people will be wanting to try these alternative spiritualities, but there are quacks. How do you distinguish? And how do you know who do you go for what?
Well,
Good question.
That's a very good question. I guess because I've come from a skeptical place, that's always been my question. How do I trust what you are doing and the information that you have? And one of the first ways is that I want to know what kind of training they have, and is it from a reputable source. The other is, do they have other related training that for me would ground them? Like, do they have a nursing background, a minister's background? Do they have some other profession that they work within ethical guidelines? A social worker, that kind of thing, so that I'm aware of what kind of boundaries there are to this. And the other way I go is how it feels when I talk with them.
So your own intuitive hunch, like we
That's
always
right.
get. There's certain times when you meet with somebody, it just feels like a good match. And other times when, so you just listen to your own sort of internal warning signals. But does it help, say, Patricia, to have a background in, like yourself, nursing and social work, and then complement it with healing touch programs? Is that sort of the best of both worlds that you can bring? Or is that harder? Do you have to unlearn some things?
You may well do, and I think of the woman that is trained, Shelley Janet, who said, "I'm just a secretary," and yet she is the most innately skilled healer. So I mean, it doesn't depend on medical background, but on a willingness to be open to the possibility of allowing the energy to come through you, and just trusting that will happen. I think that there are things in medical field, and certainly in religion, in the religion business, that we might have to forget, unlearn.
That's interesting. You're saying in both religion and medicine, when we look at these new healing practices, there are things. Well, we talk often a lot about the medicine stuff. What will we have to forget in religion?
I think that we have to forget that that Jesus was the only one who could heal.
We think he was the only one?
When we read the Gospels, we may have the impression that Jesus was the healer, and yet when we look at the stories very carefully and closely, we see that Jesus acted too as a channel of divine energy of healing.
And I think a lot of people look at those stories and don't even think they really happened. Do you? In the rational sense? I mean, in that those were the stories that somehow were sort of exaggerated by the writers of the day?
That's right. And you use the term in the rational sense. I think I could probably be challenged on what is rationality, but I think we have become super rational beings. And to choose a phrase from Madeleine L'Engle, we need to re-enter the irrational season. And pay attention to what the church has forgotten about who we were intended to be.
So you see then that one of the things the church would need to get rid of, or religion would need to get rid of, is this allegiance, shall we say, to a kind of way of thinking and seeing the world. Is that what you're...
Can I speak to that?
Sure, please.
I think that the form of religion is always very important to ground what we're talking about.
Right.
Just as our medical model is important to ground us. But from my experience, you also need to be open to experiencing new and greater things.
Yeah.
That's right.
What's the difference between being cured and being healed? Because when we go to the hospital to get cured often. We get cured of an illness, we're better.
Well, I think that what's important in looking at that is that curing tends to look at just the physical. It's like taking a car to an auto body shop and getting it fixed. But we forget that there's a driver and that we are more than just the physical. So that healing to me looks at the emotional part of the person, the mental part, and the spiritual. And in fact, someone may die having experienced healing.
We talked about it as being healed into death.
So that people often, when they realize that they have a terminal illness, they may not be cured of that illness.
That's right.
But in the time left between their diagnosis, they do so much soul searching and so much internal work and maybe healing of relationships.
That's right. That's right.
That they die a more complete and whole person.
That's right. We talk very easily, not so much in the United Church, but in some about salvation. It simply means wholeness, completion. The healing that we talk about then is healed into wholeness, fullness. And I don't know about you, but I've met some double amputees that are whole people.
Oh, yes.
Very much whole people.
Yeah.
Yeah. The interesting thing is that, like, cure means care for, heal means to care about. So it's the compassion element that is in healing and wholeness.
Now, there's a lot of different types of healing practices that people may be aware of. There's Reiki, acupressure, I've heard of therapeutic touch, healing touch. Again, where does one go to learn the differences? Because, again, I think there is openness and interest, but it feels kind of all Greek to me.
Yeah. Therapeutic touch, they usually say that in order for someone to teach that, they have to have done at least an intermediate level of therapeutic touch so that you are aware that the instructor has certain qualifications. With healing touch, in order to teach it, you need to be a certified healing touch practitioner and certified healing touch instructor. And there are programs throughout North America, as well as Britain, New Zealand, and Australia now in that.
Can you show me how you do this? I mean, can you show me? I mean, something.
Certainly.
Yeah, I'd like,
I'd
like to see.
Do you want to be the?
You don't know. You've got your mic on, so you have to not move too quickly and too
All
carefully.
right.
Well, how about if I just work on your arm here,
All
Patricia?
right. You know that my shoulder, my famous shoulder here. Okay.
What I'm feeling right now, actually, is a fair amount of heat, what feels like heat and tension, over Patricia's shoulder, and this is called unruffling in therapeutic touch. I'm working to smooth out the energy flow.
So that means when you say smooth out the energy is kind of jagged and ragged, sort of like at the end of a day we feel...
That's right. That's right. Just like physically, we may have the muscles more knotted in areas, well, the energy is the same. From my experience as a physiotherapist, when I balance the energy, the muscle responds, and I don't need to do the massage or the heavy work. One of my patients at St. Paul's called this a lovely air massage.
It's wonderful and gentle. I mean, it's just the most gentle.
And you can see that it is absolutely non-intrusive in that you don't even have to touch. you can put hands on, and there are specific times when hands on is what is called for, but it's so that the healing center of your hand can direct energy specifically into a spot.
Yeah.
And then it would just be like this.
Okay. And now you described that as what was it, unruffling?
Unruffling.
Unruffling, okay. What are some of the other practices that happen? I mean, obviously this is a way to sort of smooth out the energy, as you said. If someone was in severe pain or whatever, is there anything more you do?
Well, there are various, there's basically two ways to move your hands. One is to move them and the other is to put them on. There's various what I call recipes of, of combinations of how you would put them on the body to have different effects.
I see.
And what we do within the Healing Touch program is teach those various combinations.
But the first step is always for the healer, whoever is doing the practice, to take that very, very essential moment for deep centering and making sure that they are fully grounded so that it is something that is not coming from them but through them.
Do you sometimes, when you're doing this, sense an area of trouble in someone's body or spirit or emotional?
Oh, quite definitely.
Yeah, so that if someone had perhaps a tumor growing in their stomach or, you know, whatever, that you might sense a burning, or is
What you would usually sense is the disturbance in the energy field. So that it may be that there's an area of coolness where there isn't as much energy, or there may be a lot of disturbance.
That's a present thing. What about, say, a past trauma, you know, from childhood, adolescence, at any age? I mean, do you sense those things too, things that people have left unresolved?
Definitely.
And how do they feel in the Healing Touch?
Shelley, do you remember when you were working first of all on my neck and had said that you feel something that is very, very old? And I had not been able to come up with anything that connected very old. Well, it's taken me all this time, and I have remembered. When I was 3.5, I had a mastoid operation. I mean, you could have been feeling something that was that old. It's so long ago I had forgotten all about it. So,
and what you're saying there is that the body, and I guess because we're talking with the body and the spirit and the mind all being linked, each in their own way and also together remember everything, don't they?
Yes, exactly. And it's through the body that we will usually begin to piece the jigsaw puzzle together.
Well, how do people get involved? I mean, you talk about Healing Touch programs. How do people find out more for themselves to improve their lives, or to learn to be able to sort of reach out to others?
Do you want me to speak about the Healing Touch program?
Yeah.
They can either contact Healing Touch Canada, and I can give the phone number. It's in Toronto, is where the centre office is. Do you want?
Sure.
It's area code 416, and then it's 699-5141.
Just say that again.
Area code 416, 699-5141.
Okay, great. Thanks.
That's the head office for Healing Touch Canada for all of Canada. Otherwise, they can look in their local area for flyers that would talk about Healing Touch or Therapeutic Touch.
I think it may already be fully subscribed, but Shelley will be also teaching at Naramata this summer, as she has done in the past. And in the fall, we're both going to be co-leading a program for those who have had initial levels of Healing Touch, specifically looking at how this can be introduced into churches and congregations.
Is there a lot of openness for that kind of thing, or are people still pretty skeptical or frightened?
There are pockets of openness, and you just need 1 or 2 pockets before the seams start coming apart.
Okay, yeah. So you're talking about churches. You studied with a medicine man, didn't you, at one point?
Yes, yes.
Say a little more about that, because that's what it was your experience with a native man in Edmonton in the hospital that got you involved. Say something about that.
Well, I initially just would meet with him to just talk, to carry on a conversation, and then as he got to know me more, he invited me to go back to his camp, which was back in the Rocky Mountains with his family. And I was able to go back and observe some of the rituals and participate in them and watch him do some healing and sweat lodges. So it was really a wonderful experience. I don't think I appreciated it as much then as I do now, looking back, and realize what a gift it was.
At that point, then you were kind of there and just sort of taking it all in, right? Yeah. I'm still, quite frankly, amazed that, that when you said that the energy field is so distant from each one of us. I just would have imagined, I've seen people, you know, with these pictures, that one's energy, I just thought it was around here, but you're talking about several feet.
Well, we have layers to it. We have layers. It's like a layer of an onion almost. And close to the body is working in the physical and the emotional field. As you get further out, you're working more in spiritual, what's called spiritual realms, fields.
And this goes for absolutely everybody. We're connected to each other, or each, like, so the whole thing is, and to then the plants and the trees and so on, there's an energy to all of this.
Yes.
So, I'm sounding like such a skeptic, aren't I, as if I've heard this for the first time, but I think it's fascinating.
Well, we drop these phrases, we read them, and we talk about the web of life and the interconnectedness of all things. We're talking about the reality of that.
Right. And that we are all part of the sort of the one source. Very exciting stuff, and thank you both for being here in Pressure Point to talk about the Healing Touch program and your own experiences and sort of those unlimited possibilities for all of us. It's been great.
Thank you, Brad.
Thank you, Brad.
Thanks a lot. Great. I've been talking with Patricia Baker and Rochelle Graham about Healing Touch programs, and they are both Healing Touch practitioners. Thanks for joining us on Pressure Point. I'm Brad Newcombe.
The preceding program was produced through the facilities of Rogers Community 4, Vancouver. We want to hear from you and invite you to leave your comments and suggestions on our 24-hour response line message machine. Please call 731-5812.